So we are live. Welcome, guys, to this new stream. We're going to try to understand about Dart constructors and many other um, things of Dart. So the first thing that we're going to look is Dart constructor. And let's read this blog post because I have found that this blog post is amazing. It is a medium.com blog post. So first of all, the Dart constructor does not really need a new keyword to use when creating objects. A constructor is used to ensure instances are created in a coherent state. Okay. A constructor has no arguments, so we can leave it out when right. The default constructor is implicitly defined. Most times we need to configure our instances. For example, pass in height of the robot, and we can do this thing by passing 5 to robot, and this is gonna automatically get into the variable height, and this is then gonna say that this dot height equals to height, or when height is this double height, and this height is this value height. Now this is called an initializer. We can also just remove all this text and just pass in this dot height or this dot data just at the constructor, and we'll do the same thing. Okay, imagine that the height field is expressed in feet and we want the client to supply heights in meters. That also allows us to initialize fields with computations from static methods. So for example, we have a static function called meter to feet, which takes the variable meter and then it uses the lambda expression, which is this is the lambda expression. If you cannot see this clearly, let me zoom in the page. Yeah. So this, I think, is the lambda expression, which then says that, okay, now m is multiplied with 3.281 and stored it into a double value. We have not given the double variable in front of the function because it is dynamically typed. Dart is dynamic in nature. So it understands the variable. So it understands the type of data that we are trying to store at runtime. In other words, when the constructor gets the height, this height is in meter, and it just calls the meter to height function, and it converts it into feet, and then this feet is then stored in the height variable. Sometimes we must call super constructor when initializing. Suppose we have a constructor machine, which is the parent class robot, and sometimes we can pass a super keyword constructor in the end of the child constructor by giving a comma. So this will go to the parent class, giving the name which we are passing to the program. If we need to add more complex guards than types against a malformed robots, we can use assert. So first we can take that the height is kind of stored in the height final variable, and also check that height must be greater than 4.2. So only if the height is greater than 4.2, then only you store the height, otherwise not. For example, let me just do one program over here. Say I have a class robots, and I have, say, so static final double height, say this is nothing, this is blank. And as you can see, there is a red squiggly line stating that the final variable height must be initialized because if we are initializing it, we will initialize it by a constructor. So we're going to say robots, and we're going to say that we're going to pass in the height, and there is an error which says all final variables must be initialized, but height is not. So we need to initialize height. So in that case, we're going to say that this dot height equals to height semicolon, where it still throws an error. Constructors can't return a value. What? Oh, I used the lambda expression. I'm so sorry. I have to use the whole expression, but still there is an error. Height is a static field in the enclosing class. Fields initialized in constructors can't be static. Okay. So field initialized in constructors can't be static. The meaning of static, let's understand um, static in Dart. So its static actually means that the value of height will remain same for all the objects. If we change the value of height for any object, it will get automatically changed for all the other objects that we create of the robot class. In that case, if we say that this is a static variable, then if we are trying to change the height, first of all, if we are trying to change the height, so we are trying to initialize the height variable, and we are trying to change the height, but it says the height is a static field in the enclosing class. Field initialized in its constructor can't be static. So fields initialized can't be static. Static field initialize initialize in constructor dot static constructor in Dart. Now the static constructor in Dart is something, there's no such thing as static constructor in Dart. Named constructor as shape.circle or achieved by something like this. However, a couple of static initializers works around. Static construct constant list type is this. Okay, but I want to check we can initialize static members by calling the class members directly. So you can say a dot a equals colon colon equals to a. So if it is not null, then only initialize it, otherwise not. So if it is a static variable, then we cannot use a this keyword. We have to say robots dot height equals to height. Still, there's an error. All final variables must be initialized, but height is not. We are initializing height. Why are you saying we cannot initialize height? We remove the final keyword for now. If I just remove this thing, I just say robots.height. It works. So if it is not null, then it works. It also works. So so this thing works. However, if I remove this thing and I say robots.height equals to height, then it doesn't really work. Very strange. Really very strange. So from now onwards, let's try to remove this idea, because as I tried this thing, when I say robots.height equals to height, in that case it throws an error that isn't a field in identifier correctly enormous of quotation space isn't a field in the enclosing class. What? Um, I don't understand. Really, I don't understand. It should work. It should really work. But it says that space isn't a field in the composing class. Try correcting the name to match an existing field or defining a field name. So from now onwards, let's just remove all this ideology and say something like this, that so robots are height, it will work perfectly fine. And in that case, if I give final, then as you can see, it says error because all final variables must be initialized, but height is not. Now, the reason it throws because what we are trying to do is we're trying to initialize the height of variable as a class variable. So if it is a class variable and it says height can be used, etc., because it's however, if I remove this thing and I say this and I remove this static keyword and I save it and still it says, it's really confusing. It really is confusing. Now it works. Very strange. It is like the most confusing thing I've ever seen in my life. Why will it throw like this? It's just the same text. Height can't be used as a setter because it's final. I'm not using it as a setter. Ooh, let's try to find this answer. Final variable in Dart. Static means member available on the class itself instead of on instances of the class. That all it means that it isn't used for anything else. Static modifies members. Final means single assignment. A final variable or field must have an initializer. Once assigned a value, final variables cannot be changed. Final modifies variable. Has a meaning that's a bit more complex and subtle in Dart. Const modifies values. You can use it when collections like and creating collections like const 1, 2, 3, and when constructing objects like const point. Here, const means the object's entire deep state can be determined entirely at compile time, and that the object will be frozen and completely immutable. However, what I have understood from here is that we cannot just move the final value and it will work perfectly fine. However, if I use final, then it will say that we have all final variables must be initialized, but height is not. In that case, I am initializing height over here, but it doesn't. But for final variables, we cannot do this thing like this. For final variables, we have to explain it like here only. Or if I say dynamic height, it will work. But however, if I try to make this thing like within this, like um, this dot height equals to height, then it will not work. It will not work. This is the same thing, but it will not work for final variables. In this case, what we can do is we can just write in this dot height equals to height. So no, I really do not know why this thing works. I have to give a comment stating that this thing will work. Ah, this thing will not work. Now, I do not know why this thing doesn't really work in this case. However, in the opposite scenario, if we make it static, then then this will not work and this will work. So I did not know why Dart does it. I have no idea at all. Really confusing. Really confusing. Static. Let's make it static. And if I remove this with the robots, then also it will not work. So final this dot height. So far we have understood that for final keywords we can use it. For static keyword we have to use this thing. Anyways, constructor. Let me move forward with our constructor idea. Is deconstructing the constructor, accessors and mutators. Oh, just doing the same thing actually. So, but robots don't grow; their height is constant. Let's prevent anyone from modifying the height by making the field private. So, if I make this field as private, and okay, so this dot height equals to this thing. Now there's an error. Now it works. Okay, fine. I was really confused. Anyways, so we have a final variable height, and I do not really want anyone to change it from anything else. So I can do one thing. I can make a getter value. So I'm going to get the height. The variable say get height. I'm going to give us the Can I do like this? Can I give a private getter method? We cannot. Why is it saying? The name height is already defined, so I cannot really use it again. We have to use something else. And I can get the height, but I cannot use setters again. I cannot use set height. If I say like this, and I try to make sure that height equals 2, it's an error because the height is a final and we cannot use final to set. But if I remove the final keyword from here, we can now set it. But since it is final, I do not want to be set more than once. So we cannot use setters in final variables. So what we can do is, for the first time, if I try to make a main function with no other return type, and I want to make sure that we have a robots my rob equals to robots and it was on their height. Say 5.6. Okay, and now if I want to print out the height of my robot is dollar my rob dot height, and this is going to call the getter method actually, and will give us the height of rob. So we'll save this thing and let's print out on constructors dot system cannot find the file specify. Why is that? Did I make it in the wrong directory? Yeah, I was in the wrong directory. So now it is 5.6. However, if I try to change it, like if I say if my rob dot height equals to say 6 now, it will throw an error. First of all, it will throw an error because it is final, we cannot set it, and also because it is private, we cannot change it. However, if I remove this final keyword, it will work as double height is being able to change the height. It should not be able to change the private value. Wait a minute. But now there is no way to access dot height. What? Seriously? Getter functions that takes no arguments and conform to the uniform access principle. We can simplify our getter by using the two shortcuts, single expression syntax fat arrow and implicit this. So there is a private value and setting the private value, then getting the private value and then changing the private value to something else. Problem, however, is dot private variables. I want to create a private variable, but I cannot. For example, B extends A. So class A contains a private variable, private, and contains a constructor which prints out the private value, which is 0, and then it is changed to private problem. Now when B extends A, it is now creating a new private variable, string private, and it should throw an error. First it goes to B, creates a new variable, new constructor of B, new object of B. Is it really possible to create two different so actually class B cannot see the private value. Is this true? If this is true, then we can say string private is true. Hello and test A string value of private. Calling the constructor test A, and we are printing out calling the constructor of test A from test B, and it should print out int value is hello, which is not the case. Privacy in Dart exists at the library. If we were to put class A in a separate library, others.dart, such as library other class A, and continue class, and then import other.dart, you get the expected output. So privacy in Dart exists in library other than class level. Okay. So privacy only exists in libraries, not in class level. So unlike Java, we can use, we couldn't, if we call constructor, then it will call the private variable of this class, of this class A, not class of B. Okay. So privacy extends at library level rather than the class level. I'll try to go in a more detail in this answer. I'll answer the question what lead with this. That's just how Dart is intended to be written. Partly because library private members make it easier to define operations like equals equals. private variables of a second object couldn't be seen for the comparison. Now that we have got that out of the way, I'll start out by showing you how it's meant to be done, library private instead of class private, and then show you how to make a variable class private if you still really want that. Here we go. If one class has no business saying variables on another class, you might ask yourself whether they really belong in the same library. They should be in the separate library from main for the reason stated in the main method below. But we can still main must be in separate library to prevent modifying the backend. The backend fails like this, but main can still modify it. So what is it doing? My class dot from val is another constructor, named constructor, which now changes the private value. Not a problem with that. That should be good. However, if you really want private class data, though you technically aren't allowed to create private variables, you could emulate it using following closure technique. However, you should really be careful, consider whether you really need it and whether there is a more Dart-like way to do what you are trying to accomplish. So you are trying to create a type def of function in getter and in setter. In getter, its name is getVal and setVal. My class always in variable, private variable, getVal equals to. So getVal is a function which is taking an anonymous function int getter, and it just returns back the variable. SetVal takes this int val and v and returns back the variable when v is less than 0. If it is true, then return val, otherwise not. A factory constructor which returns result, and result is an object of my class. It's my class with base. So actual result is an object of my class dot base, which doesn't mc.var. Let's check. So my class mc dot my class of from val in val 1 mc dot set val. We are trying to set wait a minute. So we're trying to create val is a variable which is 1, and mc is an object calling the from val, which returns back the result. So basically you are returning back an object after it has called the base constructor. So after it has called the base constructor, and the base constructor, after calling the base constructor, you get the mc.getVal. GetVal is defined inside a constructor. So a method is defined inside a constructor. That is pretty strange. So method is defined inside a constructor. That should mean that whenever the MC is being created, at that time only the result object is also created, and it is actually an object of my class. That's it. And it also can call setVal, and it can easily access setVal even if it is inside a constructor. No really problem with that. I never knew this thing. Okay. And you can pass in the val variable, and this is going to set the value to be 1. So be -1 actually. And now you can print it out as -1. But setVal fails. Can get the variable, but you cannot set the variable. So basically, set val, when you call set val, then it checks that whether one is 1, v is less than 0. If it is true, it is not true, then return back v. So we get val is equals to 1. In the next case, when we pass in -1, we check that -1 less than 0 is true. If it is true, then we don't pass in -1, we return back the previous 1 only. And then we can say print get val, we get 1 only. On the upside, you can't access val, mc dot underscore val doesn't really compile, because val is now placed inside a constructor and not outside. So we can do one thing, we can just copy this piece of code and let's get back my dot program, paste it in here. As you can see, there is no problem getting it. Now, problems are two different other program problems. Let's save it, and we get value as 1. So if I make it to be, say, 2, then we're going to print out 2. Absolutely. On the upside down, we cannot really access val because val is inside a constructor. However, if I change it back in the type, in the class body, then we can access my val, I believe. Yep. Now, if I change it like this, then mc.val is still 2, but we did not really call get val in this case. So let's print it now, and now we get 6. So that is the idea. So basically, even if the private, even if the value is private, the main function can still see it because it is in the same library. However, if I do define it in different libraries, then the main function might not be able to see the private class. So to do that, let's do one thing. Let me remove every single thing, Z, and just go back to my previous program. Fantastic. Remove all this stuff. We have a private variable called height. You can have a getter method of height. We can even create a setter method of height. Let's remove the final keyword for now, and let's give a value to it, and we can say that this is gonna create height equals to value. Fantastic. Now let's create it in a library, say robots. So library robots. Now if I save it, let's go back to my f dot hello dot constructor dot dot. What is this example dot dot? It shouldn't be in the example dot dot over here. As I've seen earlier in the other Stack Overflow questions, we have this. Now let's go back over here. Let's create class, say, robotic dot dot. Now if I can say import will not work because wait a minute. Let's give the library as constructors, and let's place this thing here. I want to place it in here. Now, as you can see, I can use the constructors dot dot. However, if I change this name to robots, and can I change it to robots? I cannot. So it should be the name that we are trying to create. So constructors dot dot. So what the user using library keyword at all? I'm not really sure what library keyword actually does. We're gonna keep that thing out of our mind for now. Let's move on and let's create a main function. And we're going to create my robots my rob equals to robots, where I'm going to pass in the height. And now can I change it? Now can I change the height? No, I cannot. As you can see, right now I cannot change the height variable. There is no prompt. Actually, my rob dot underscore, if I say height equals to 9, it will throw an error because we cannot change the height of the private variable. However, if I can change it using several methods, my rob dot set height, and I pass in a value, say 8, right? And left out my rob dot height, which is going to call the getter method and give us the height of rob. So if I go back in hello dot cd bin dot robotic dot that's strange. Double has no instance method call no such method error. This is gonna be double instance. Still throws an error saying this expression doesn't evaluate to a oh my god, Jesus Christ, I had to change it like this, not a function. I made a mistake, I'm sorry for that. Dot. Still it says an error. I gave 8.9. Now I think it works. It gives 8.9. Pass in some other keyword. Let's say if I give 5.3, it will work. 5.3. And now the idea is to convert an integer to double. So I don't know whether Dart allows this thing. Let's find out. Int to double convert Dart. So it does not really have the thing that it can dynamically convert it into double. However, if I change this thing value, so if value is dynamic in nature, so when I'm trying to set it, it is taking dynamic values, and dynamic values can get converted automatically. I give it 5, then it will automatically take it as any value it wants. It is dynamic in nature. If it takes as int, then it tries to store an int in a double height, then it will throw an error at us. As you can see, unhandled expression, int is not a subtype of type double. So if I say it as double, still it will throw an error because we are passing an int to a double, but it doesn't really throw an error. So when we pass 5 to it, it automatically converts it to a double and then passes it. But if we are trying to pass a value to a dynamic variable, then automatically typecast is to integer or double. But when you're trying to pass a variable, say 5 just, then it converts it into double and then passes to the variable which really needs to store. So if I say like this, if I have a double value, double my pad equals to 8, it works because the 8 is getting converted to 8.0 and then it is getting passed over there. So I think that was a problem in this case. And now this is the idea of using constructors, very private variables actually in Dart. So this is the idea of private variables. Now one more thing that we missed out is the idea of libraries in Dart. Now let's create library over here. Library, let's say constructors. Let's give some other library, say, no, let's give mylib. Okay, say that's for practicing purposes, we're giving mylib. And if I go to the folder, I cannot really see any such mylib directory which does contain the constructor.dart. So I'm not really sure what this mylib library is going to do, what will it do. So I will proceed forward in the next video, just from this point, moving on forward with different kind of constructors in Dart. So till then, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys again in the next video. I'll be back